Did you know that imagination is racist? So I was thinking about this. It's May the 4th, Star Wars Day, and I was thinking recently how everyone needs a bit of escapism, right? Sometimes you just want to switch off. You want to get away from the real world. You're paying your bills, earning your wage, this sort of thing. Get away from the grid. Just put those systems to one side.
When I want to get away from the real world, I read The Guardian.
And some people descend into drink, which is my preferred option. But if you're not doing that, then there are lots of hobby groups and things of completely harmless stuff, a lot of it, like fantasy worlds, or some people play Dungeons and Dragons, whatever it may be. Choose your poison, whatever floats your boat. But the whole culture war stuff really kicked off with controversy about video games to start with in 2011, which is just one of these hobby-type things. Yeah, that sort of thing. It had been going on before then, but that was when it really blew up. And things have got so insane since then that I kind of miss the entitled activist screechings about patriarchy. Now, I have put this slide here because, for me, this is the feminist vision of what patriarchy is. You have, it's like a psychological representation. You have an engorged male slug with a slave woman on a chain. That's what they seem to think patriarchy is, especially when it comes to nerds or nerd hobbies, that sort of thing. But in their noble quest to smash the patriarchy, I think that feminists have attempted to upend the gender dynamic in this picture by becoming Jabba the Hutt themselves. If you've seen any footage of...
They look like him.
Yeah, a lot of feminist activists from recently. They look a lot less like the lady on the left and more like the thing on the right.
Yeah, but what happened to hot feminists?
Were they ever a thing? Was that something when you were alive?
There's definitely hot feminists in the 90s. Mm-hmm. Feminism went through its hot phase.
Mm. Well, I don't recall that, sadly. So that's passed me by. But the quest to upend society has seen the subversion of all hobby spaces, claiming them to be sexist or racist or transphobic or otherwise politically incorrect. And in this segment, we're going to take a look at some of the hobbies and hobby groups that have been invaded by woke. So did you know that knitting is political? I don't know what you're laughing about, Leo. I'm deadly serious.
It's the New York Times. The New York Times.
I know. Knitting has always been political, says the New York Times. Traditionally, politics are not for the dinner table or the crafting circle. But on Sunday, Ravelry, a popular website for knitters and crocheters, took a political stand when it announced that it was banning content that supports President Trump in what it said was a resolution against white supremacy. We cannot provide a space that is inclusive of all and also allow support for open white supremacy, the site said in a statement explaining the decision. Support of the Trump administration is undeniably support for white supremacy.
What?
Is this the sort of thing you expect when you want to go, oh, you know what, I just want to go for a little Wednesday afternoon knitting with the lasses?
Yeah, this is why I like to get my political analysis from intellectuals with a lot of experience of politics and not people who run knitting sites.
Right, absolutely.
I mean, support of the Trump administration is undeniably support for white supremacy. No, it's not.
Right, but you want to knit because you're escaping from the politics in the real world, right? You don't want to knit because you want to make the most politically correct stitch that has ever been stitched.
Everything's got to be politically correct now. You've got to have your Stasi-approved scarf pattern.
Mm-hmm. And on that, did you know that also gardening is racist? Weeding Out Horticulture's Race Problem by James Wong. Even in the garden, there's bigotry to be found.
Why? What's he dug up?
Well, he was saying that
dug up the like corpse of Adolf Eichmann or something.
Yeah, I don't know what skeletons he's got buried in his garden. But no, he was giving what seems to be a reasonable account of in his life as a gardener, he has occasionally been subject to what you might consider racist abuse, things like that. And fair enough, that might be true. But I then asked the question, why is that newsworthy?
Yeah.
And I know exactly why it's newsworthy. It's the availability heuristic from psychology. And this is a mistake, like a programming fault that all humans do, which is when we're asked how often or how popular something is, instead of actually evaluating that, we look back in our memory and say, oh, I've seen 3 incidents of racist people in gardening, so gardening must be totally racist. Yeah. So they know that by putting this out, all they need to do is tell one story of one person who experienced some mild racism to then persuade their entire readership that horticulture is racist.
Yeah. I just can't believe people who buy The Guardian still buy this stuff. This utter nonsense.
It makes good compost.
There's no way. There's no way gardening's there's no way gardening's racist unless Jeremy Corbyn's doing it, and then it's deeply anti-Semitic.
Anti-Semitic gardening. There's a new one for you, folks. But another thing which is racist, of course, is classical music. Black scholars confront white supremacy in classical music. The field must acknowledge a history of systemic racism while also giving new weight to black composers, musicians, and listeners.
It was the old days. There weren't that many black composers in Vienna in the 1600s.
That's true, but there have been many black musicians, and many of them very talented. And of course, there have been many non-classical black musicians, especially in jazz, which originated from black music in America and so on.
Yeah, but that's like me saying there's systemic anti-whiteness in Jamaican music hall or something. You know what I mean? Like it's Jamaican bashment music. It's like it's from Jamaica. You know what I mean?
Expect?
So there's going to be systemic whiteness in Scottish folk music.
I think we need some systemic common sense in evaluating these claims, to be honest. But
like when was it done? And what country was it done in? Was that a mostly white country? Is that maybe why most of them are white?
There's no proportional thinking. There's a beautiful paragraph in here which could basically be cookie cutter taken out of this hobby, classical music, and put into any other hobby. So here we go. Since nationwide protests over police violence erupted in May and June, American culture has been engaged in an examination, however nominal, of its relationship with racism. Nominal? Such an examination, in name only, they're trying to say. Such an examination is sorely needed in classical music because of its extreme dependence on a problematic past. The undertaking is complex. The field must acknowledge a history of systemic racism while also honouring the individual experiences of black composers, musicians, and listeners. Now, remove all of the words there, the terminology that are to do with classical music, and replace them with literally anything else, because you can do that, and I guarantee people will have done that across the spectrum. Like, you are just looking at an ideological blurting out here. There's no actual thinking going on in that construction of that paragraph.
I just can't believe people are still, buying it, like getting the New Yorker magazine and being like, oh yeah, no, this is another article about what a terrible person I am because of the color of my skin.
Yeah.
Like I can't, this is brilliant. Let me subscribe.
It's a bizarre masochistic pleasure they seem to take.
Why do they?
Oh
man, I miss it when people just went to a dominatrix and got like whipped. At least you've got a boner when you do that. Like, who's got a boner reading this?
I don't know. There's some strange people in America, Leo. Rule 34. But another thing which is problematic is, of course, Magic the Gathering. Female players of Magic the Gathering face a daunting opponent. Sexism.
What's Magic the Gathering?
Magic the Gathering is a collectible card game, a bit like the old Pokemon collectible card game, but older and nerdier and still played commonly to this day.
I do not believe that any women play this.
There aren't many of them, that's true. So here we have, when Jackie Lee plays in Magic the Gathering tournaments, she doesn't just have to face her competitors, she also has to face sexist vitriol from strangers. And there is an idea that all of these spaces are essentially dominated by malodorous, overweight nerds with neckbeards.
I agree.
They do have
they
do have that reputation for a reason, though, and I certainly think that there could be improvements made there.
Yeah.
But again, it's the case of taking one example of someone experiencing sexism, which may be entirely justified as sexism, and then that gets reported and blown up to such proportions that people then associate, Magic the Gathering, that's that thing that's sexist, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if that's the thing if that's your hobby, you've spent hundreds of hours collecting, playing, getting immersed in that world.
Yeah.
That is a real savage blow at your identity, I think.
Yeah.
And it's politics invading your hobby.
Yeah. But also, like, if that's your hobby, you should get a better hobby. There's so many hobbies now. Why are you still doing some sort of nerd game?
I think you could get an outdoor hobby.
An outdoors hobby, yeah. Maybe one where you might meet some women who don't complain.
But we also have Magic the Gathering banning racist cards. Which is quite funny if we just scroll down and look at a few of these. Invoke Prejudice was banned. What else do we have? Cleanse was banned. All black creatures in play are destroyed. It's a bit problematic. Virtue's Ruin was that not addressed? Yeah, that was not addressed. Destroy all white creatures was all right.
I think when they say black creatures and white creatures, they're not talking about
the skin color of the cards. No, they're different color flavors in the game.
It's like when you've got a game of chess and there's the white pieces and the black pieces.
That is also racist, by the way. I wish I had put that in. That was next in this segment, but I took it out for brevity. And people saying it's racist that white moves first in chess. Why is that? Everything's racist, gentlemen. Get used to it. Carrying on with the nerd hobbies, we have Warhammer 40,000. Do you know about this?
No.
So this is a tabletop miniature gaming
Right,
thing.
yeah.
Again, fairly nerdy, quite male.
What do you mean fairly?
So we have this article, is Warhammer 40k fascist, racist, and misogynist? And it goes on and on.
is.
There is an entire subreddit devoted to political activism in this hobby. If we go to this one, this is from Sig Marxism. Yeah, and it's just a load of political stuff. But we also, so Carl, the boss, did a article about the politics of Warhammer 40,000, and there is an audio track for this which is 2 hours long. He's quite into his Warhammer, and it makes some reasonable philosophical points. So if you are of the nerd persuasion, if you can get into Warhammer 40k and you can listen to a 2-hour podcast on this, there's actually some pretty good philosophical and cultural analysis that he uses 40k as a vehicle for. But what else is racist and sexist?
Everything.
Well, it's also horse riding.
Yeah. Not in like America in 1700 it wasn't.
No, was it not?
Well, not from the films I've seen.
It was a Native American dominated sport.
They weren't called Native Americans then, but they were riding around on horses, bows and arrows.
If we scroll down to this glorious picture here. So this is what horse riding should look like. I think the photo speaks for itself. For those people who are listening to the audio track, we have a black woman riding a horse with a massive cardboard Black Lives Matter placard on its site in the middle of a protest. And the title of the article is Brianna Noble Addresses Inclusivity, Socioeconomics and Racism in Equestrian Sport. If you just wanted to ride horses, I'm sorry, like you need to be an anti-racist now? Anyway, what else is racist? Dog walking. The dog walking is racist. Dog walkers at Howard University infringe on Black Mecca, students say. In an online forum, someone said they were told to leave by students while walking their dog on campus. And they continue, gentrification has irritated yet another community of color. Classic Guardian rhetoric. In Washington, D.C., students and alumni of Howard University are objecting to residents who walk their dogs on the campus, feeling these actions infringe on the campus and its history. The university is historically black and affectionately referred to as one of the black meccas of American society. I love the fact there are historically black things, but not historically white things in America. It's very curious.
So this is people, because I assumed it was going to be people getting upset that, like, walkers getting upset that other dog walkers were black or something. That's what they were going to be alluding to. But no, this is black people getting upset at people for walking their dogs.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
If that was,
You're walking
the
your
other way
dog in my
round,
neighborhood. I know.
if that was the other way round, that'd be like absolute, like, arrestable racism.
It
on
would
the part
be,
of
yeah.
the,
Could you imagine saying, I don't like all of the black people walking their dogs in my neighborhood? It's absolutely outrageous, that kind
We've
of
got to clip that out and just.
I know, someone will. I knew that was going to happen as soon as I opened my mouth. Ugh. Anyway. But on the other topic, we have Dungeons and Dragons, another nerd hobby. All of the nerd hobbies are sexist, racist, and so on.
Yeah.
Mainly because nerds can't really put up a fight against it a lot of the time.
Yeah, and also black people have better hobbies. Women and
A
black
lot of
people
black
have
nerds.
better hobbies than playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Actually, Dungeons and Dragons is surprisingly popular among the fairer sex these days. It's amazing. Back in the day, that was not the case, but it's been popularized by shows such as Critical Role. And
all the wizard stuff, maybe. There's so much
the witchy
wizards.
stuff,
There's Harry Potter. What else? Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Right, yeah.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
No, so it has gradually become a bit more mainstream than it was back in their day. But this is a lovely post. Revolutionize your next Dungeons and Dragons game with this anti-capitalist anarchist campaign guide. Eat the Rich is a collection of explicitly anti-capitalist adventures for the Dungeons and Dragons role-playing game. Each original adventure dives into classic D&D tropes and puts a new spin on them, tackling issues of workers' rights, healthcare, the prison industrial complex, the environment, animal rights, agriculture, and more. These adventures will make you passionate to join the revolution. Again, no space is safe. It's all politicized at this point.
Yeah.
And do you know what else is racist?
I don't know.
Scotland.
I mean, yeah. The SNP like to pretend they're the most progressive country in the world, and it's like, no, you're not. Scotland was quite racist. Rural Scotland, anyway, growing up.
Interesting. So if we continue here, like many others, I had bought into the rhetoric that Scotland is opening, welcoming, diverse and inclusive. As Rabbie Burns wrote, we're all Jock Tamson's bairns, right?
That's the same Rabbie Burns who was on his way to manage a slave
A
plantation.
slave plantation, which they lambasted him for, despite the fact that he knew full well it was a miserable idea and he was forced to do it for economic reasons.
Yeah, money.
Yeah.
He wanted to do it for money.
But it appears not if you are a black or brown person living in Scotland today. And they continue. Nassar Mir, professor of race identity and citizenship at Edinburgh University, told me that about a third of black and ethnic minorities in Scotland say they routinely experience racial discrimination. However, the kids of Gleeblands Primary School in Dundee give me hope for the future. Now, if Dundee is giving you hope for the future, we've all lost. But there we go. The school has launched a project called Don't Recycle Racism, which educates children on how to deal with racism if they are victims of it or see other people subjected to it. The pupils themselves have designed stickers that will be placed on bins in all primary classrooms, giving advice on what they should do. Now, personally, I've seen, in our coverage, we've seen a lot of these sort of campaigns where they are educating primary school children below the age of 10 on racism or sexism, and it turns out most of the time to be just pure propaganda. They put this nice spin on it, like, oh no, it's tolerance and it's inclusivity, but they're actually just essentially indoctrinating these kids into a rather toxic worldview. Shouldn't they be doing sums or learning how to read and write and this sort of thing at that age?
Isn't this going to take away from valuable time that they could be convincing them that they're transgender?
Well, there is that as well. One must consider all of the options when it comes to a diverse curriculum. Speaking of diversity, birdwatching is also sexist. RSPB vows to review sexist posters showing female birds are smaller than males. And this cracked me up because they're not smaller, they're further away.
Yeah.
I mean, progressives have really regressed to the Father Ted levels of incomprehensibility at this point. And it was a problem with this poster. And finally, this one took the biscuit for me. Thomas the Tank is fascist.
Yes, I've seen this before. It's
spectacular.
And there's one that's, is it Paw Patrol?
Yeah,
it's about the police. So they say it presents the police in a positive light, and that was seen as a bad thing for some reason instead of a good thing, like encouraging children to have trust in the police, who after all maintain a law-abiding society. Instead of that, they're like, no, the police are bad, they should be defunded. And I mean, I don't think they really thought through that whole defund the police
No,
thing.
I don't think they did.
No, because anywhere they've we're seeing in America right now, like murders and everything are absolutely surging.
But this is the thing, politics has to invade every arena of life, even a children's show. They have this glorious quote at the start: parents like to see themselves as purveyors of possibility. I don't know many parents who would self-describe as that, but here we go.
Yeah.
We want our children to inhabit a world in which identities are both mutable and equal, and imagination and empathy reign supreme.
But
It's a little
identities
sinister.
in identitarian politics, identities specifically aren't mutable.
Well, they're mutable as and when they want them to be mutable.
Right.
They are open to interpretation depending on your politics and the debate you're having. And they continue, but young children, as dictated by their tastes in popular culture, have something else in mind. They're drawn to worlds in which identities are fixed, order trumps imagination, and transgressions are met with routine punishment. How horrible. This clash between what parents desire for their children, because all parents are woke, and what children desire for themselves is most easily observable in cartoon preferences. So often, the more parents dislike a show, the more their children love it. Two of the most divisive shows are Thomas the Tank Engine and Paw Patrol, both of which have been eviscerated by grown-ups on discussion boards, in social media, and in widely shared essays in prestigious publications.
Who are these parents? I don't know anybody like that who's like, oh no, we want our, like, they're obviously trying to win some sort of dinner party bingo where, like, it's like, oh yeah, so Esmeralda, yeah, she's non-binary.
Oh yeah.
And, all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Instead of just being like, the shame of having the middle-class shame of having a cisgender, child.
Well, it's horrendous, isn't it?
Heterosexual and everything.
But just to recapitulate the point of why we've gone through all of these hobbies fundamentally, there is an active campaign by these anti-fans to subvert hobby groups into woke political activism. Most of them, do you really think they care about Magic the Gathering, Warhammer 40k, Dungeons and Dragons, Thomas the Tank? No, they care about politics. And you see the same in football and so on as well.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of the Guardians, I love the Guardian's sport pages because you can tell that the writer is grinding his teeth having to talk about sport, and he gets really excited when he gets to talk about inequalities and injustices and racism and things.
Yeah.
But the other more sinister message of all of this is, if you're not woke, if you're not with us, you're against us.
Yeah.
And this is a hegemonic mentality. It can't just leave you alone to do your thing. So they're just like fundamentalist Christians in the 80s and 90s with the Satanic Panic. They have to invade and make sure that what you're doing is politically acceptable.
Yep.
So these totalitarian activists will never let you catch a break. They'll never let you indulge in escapism and never let you go on flights of fantasy unless your fantasy adheres to their ever-changing definitions of political correctness.
Yeah. And I went through, I made a list of everything that's racist, everything that's been called racist, and I had to stop because it was just insane. I thought I'd maybe get like 100 things. It was just, you could go for infinity looking at things that are racist.
And it gets smaller and more pettier the more and more you look.
Yeah, with microaggressions and all this sort of stuff, there doesn't have to be any actual, like, racism used to be a measurable, objectively measurable thing. You know, somebody saying something or doing something racist, but now it can be the absence, now it can be a facial expression. And it's dangerous because this is actually now bleeding into every aspect of life. All our institutions, every part of academia, tech, the media, it's all systemically woke. And so, for example, HR departments now, this is the advice that goes out to all HR departments, is to look out for microaggressions, including facial expressions, which can be racist. So how do you objectively measure? How do you call somebody in a tribunal and it's like, well, your face, you know, the muscles in your face took a different form or whatever? It's like, that's not a...
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That's not something that can be measured in any meaningful way.
I think we are potentially moving to a world, though, where these ideas, because they are so invasive and intrusive, are becoming less and less popular with the general public, which is also more and more aware of them. However, what they have done, as you rightly described, is colonize the corporate world from the top down, from places like BlackRock and so on, with these rule structures that have to trickle down in order to do business with the only players you can do business with in these fields. And so I think we're going to increasingly move to a world where the moral order is being dictated by these essentially elite structures in top universities and top corporations, which is being forced on the rest of civil society against its will. And I think we're going to see more and more conflict there.
But then I think we're going to see companies, because obviously you can be a much more agile, profitable company if you move outside those structures, because it's like the difference between being in the free market and being in a communist society. So, I mean, in media as well, you're seeing the success of people like Lotus Eaters. You know, so that's some... Like, Lotus Eaters gets, like, the BBC would kill for some of the views that Lotus Eaters gets. You know what I mean? So people are seeking out Harry's Razors as well. You know, as a response to this wokeism. We're seeing the collapse of Netflix. We're seeing, you know, go woke, go broke is a saying for a reason. So I don't know. I've got some hope for the future.
No, absolutely. But I think it's going to be very interesting seeing what happens to this ideology. It reminds me at the moment of a religion that no one really wants. And I think people are going to get fed up of paying the tithes.
It's got all the bad things from a religion and none of the good things.
Yeah, exactly.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as the premium articles that we do. This one from Hugo, Bill Gates to the rescue, our savior. He also has an audio track there for silver tiers to listen in case you don't like reading. Also, you can follow us on Getter if you want to see what else we're putting out, at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.